The Roman sun, a colossal eye of fire, beat down on St. Peter's Square, transforming the ancient cobblestones into a shimmering, almost liquid expanse. Thousands upon thousands of people, a mosaic of humanity from every corner of the globe, stood shoulder to shoulder, their faces upturned, a collective tide of anticipation swelling and ebbing with each passing moment. The air, thick with the scent of old stone, faint incense, and the lingering perfume of a million hopes, vibrated with a low hum of excitement. Every camera lens, every cell phone screen was pointed towards the grand, ornate balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, where soon Pope Leo XIV would appear. It was Easter Sunday, a day traditionally brimming with immense spiritual significance, but today something felt different, a quiet tension underlying the joyous atmosphere. High above the throngs, amidst the gilded splendor and ancient tapestries, a man stood, cloaked in the heavy, sacred vestments of his office. Pope Leo XIV, born Cardinal Robert Prevost, felt the immense weight of the silk and brocade, but even more so, the immense weight of the world's gaze. His heart, beneath the intricate embroidery of his chasuble, beat a steady rhythm, a mixture of profound reverence and a curious, almost childlike anticipation. He was not a man given to grand theatrical gestures. His papacy, though relatively new, had been marked by a quiet humility, a gentle wisdom that seemed to connect with people on a deeply personal level, far removed from the pomp and circumstance often associated with the Vatican. His eyes, a shade of deep, contemplative blue, often held a faraway look, as if constantly peering beyond the immediate, seeking a truth only he could perceive. He had always been known for his directness, a quality that sometimes unsettled the older, more tradition-bound cardinals. As Robert Prevost, he had served in the most challenging parishes in forgotten corners of the world where faith was forged in the crucible of hardship. Those years had shaped him, carved lines of empathy around his eyes, and instilled in him a profound understanding of human suffering and resilience. He believed in the power of touch, of direct connection, something often difficult to achieve in the highly ritualized world of the papacy. Today, as he prepared to deliver the Urbi et Orbi blessing, the very air seemed charged with an unspoken understanding that this might not be just another traditional address. Below, nestled amongst the sea of faces, near a sturdy metal barrier erected to control the surging crowd, a small figure sat. Ilara, just 9 years old, her bright red wheelchair a defiant splash of color against the drab security barriers, clutched a small, worn plush lamb. Her dark, expressive eyes, wide with wonder, were fixed on the distant balcony, though she knew the figures up there would be little more than specks. Her grandmother, Maria, a woman with kind eyes and hands roughened by years of honest labor, knelt beside her, gently smoothing Ilara's tangled brown hair. Ilara's illness, a rare neurological condition, had confined her to the wheelchair for most of her young life, but it had never extinguished the spark in her spirit. She loved stories, especially those about brave knights and gentle heroes, and in her mind the Pope was the greatest hero of all, a shepherd for billions. Maria had brought Ilara all the way from their small village in Tuscany, a journey made arduous by Ilara's condition, but fueled by Maria's unwavering hope. They had risen before dawn, navigating the crowded trains and then the bustling Roman streets, to secure this spot, close enough to feel the energy, to perhaps catch a glimpse of the Holy Father's face. Ilara had painted a small, colorful drawing, a simple depiction of a dove carrying an olive branch, and held it carefully in her lap, hoping with the innocent optimism of a child that somehow the Pope might see it. Her fragile fingers, often stiff, managed to keep a firm grip on the paper, a silent testament to her determination. The grand bells of St. Peter's Basilica began their majestic peal, a booming, resonant sound that vibrated through the very ground, silencing the chatter of the crowd. A hush fell, profound and immediate, as if the very air had ceased to move. Then a murmuring began, rippling like a wave through the square as the procession began. Not from the balcony, as many expected for the final blessing, but from a side entrance at ground level, a surprise deviation from the usual protocol. Pope Leo XIV, accompanied by a retinue of Swiss Guard in their iconic striped uniforms and Vatican gendarmerie in their somber dark suits, began to walk slowly through the narrow pathway cleared for him amongst the dense crowd. Chief Inspector Rossi, head of the Vatican Gendarmerie, a man whose face seemed permanently etched with the anxieties of his demanding role, walked just a few paces ahead of His Holiness, his sharp eyes constantly sweeping the perimeter. He had personally overseen every detail of this Easter security plan, anticipating every possible threat, every potential breach. The idea of the Pope walking directly through such a vast, uncontrolled multitude was a constant source of quiet dread for him. He preferred the Pope-mobile, the armored glass providing a necessary, if distant, layer of protection. But Pope Leo XIV, in his gentle but firm way, had insisted on this more personal approach today, believing it fostered a deeper connection with the faithful. "I am a shepherd, Rossi," he had said, his voice soft but resolute. "And a shepherd walks among his flock." The procession was slow, deliberate. The Pope, with a serene smile, extended his hand, occasionally pausing to bless a rosary, to offer a word of comfort, to gently touch a child's head. His every movement was graceful, unhurried, yet filled with an undeniable sense of purpose. The Swiss guards, with their halberds held upright, formed a tight, protective cordon around him, their movements precise, almost robotic, a stark contrast to the fluid grace of the Pope. The gendarmerie, more subtly integrated into the crowd, scanned faces, assessed threats, their earpieces a constant conduit of hushed instructions and updates. The sunlight glinted off the polished brass of their badges, off the ancient, intricate embroidery on the Pope's vestments, creating a moving tapestry of light and shadow. As Pope Leo XIV approached the section where Alara and her grandmother were waiting, his gaze, which had been sweeping across the faces, seemed to slow to focus. He had blessed countless children that morning, patted many heads, but something about this particular spot, this small, bright wheelchair, caught his attention. Alara, her little heart pounding like a drum against her ribs, saw him looking. It was only for a fleeting moment, a microsecond of eye contact. But in that instant, a profound connection seemed to bridge the distance, the security barriers and the thousands of people. Alara, with a burst of courage she didn't know she possessed, held up her drawing higher, a small, trembling hand extending the crumpled paper towards him. It was a simple gesture, innocent and pure, but it stood out amidst the sea of outstretched hands holding crucifixes, prayer books, and cell phones. Her eyes, wide and hopeful, locked with his. A small, faint smile touched her lips, a fragile butterfly of joy. Pope Leo XIV's steps faltered almost imperceptibly. Rossi, ever vigilant, noticed the hesitation immediately. His hand instinctively went to his earpiece, his brow furrowing. "Your Holiness," he murmured, a note of gentle caution in his voice, trying to guide the Pope's attention forward. But the Pope's gaze remained fixed. The smile on his face, which had been one of general benevolence, softened, transforming into something far more personal, more profound. It was a look of recognition, of deep understanding, as if he had seen something in that small child that transcended the present moment. A wave of quiet murmurs rippled through the immediate vicinity of the crowd. People craned their necks, trying to see what had captured the Pope's attention. Flashbulbs from news photographers began to pop with renewed intensity, sensing a moment of significance. The security detail shifted, subtly tightening their formation, their faces now taut with a mixture of concern and anticipation. They were trained for predictable movements, for controlled interactions. This deviation, however slight, introduced an element of the unknown, a variable they could not immediately factor into their intricate plans. The Pope was veering off course. Pope Leo XIV took another step, then another, his trajectory now unmistakably altered. He was moving directly towards Alara's wheelchair, not along the designated path. Chief Inspector Rossi's eyes widened, a flicker of panic crossing his usually impassive face. "Your Holiness, please, the schedule," he began, his voice low and urgent, stepping slightly to block the Pope's path. Two Swiss guards subtly adjusted their positions, their halberds forming a tighter barrier, their eyes darting nervously between their superior and the Holy Father. The crowd in that section, sensing the shift, fell into an awed, expectant silence, their breaths held collectively. The Pope, however, did not acknowledge Rossi's words. His blue eyes, usually so calm, now burned with an almost fierce determination. He gently but firmly placed a hand on Rossi's arm, a silent command, a tender but undeniable dismissal of the inspector's concerns. "Rossi," he said, his voice quiet but resonant, "sometimes the schedule must yield to the spirit." His words, though barely audible above the low murmur of the crowd, carried the weight of absolute authority, but also profound compassion. He then stepped around the bewildered chief inspector, his gaze unwavering, fixed solely on Alara. The distance was only a few meters, but it felt like miles. Each step Pope Leo took seemed to reverberate with the weight of his decision. The Swiss guards, caught between their duty to protect and their sacred vow to obey the pontiff, hesitated for a split second, then followed, their formation now stretched, their rigid adherence to protocol visibly strained. Their faces, usually impassive, now showed a flicker of uncertainty, a human reaction beneath their disciplined exterior. The gendarmerie, dispersed throughout the crowd, communicated in frantic whispers through their earpieces, trying to ascertain the nature of this unprecedented breach. "He's going off course. Repeat, off course. Approaching the barriers," came the urgent, clipped voices. The sunlight continued to pour down, illuminating the scene with an almost ethereal glow, as if a spotlight had been cast specifically on this singular moment. The air crackled with anticipation, a mix of awe and apprehension. Ilara, clutching her drawing, watched him approach, her mouth slightly agape, her eyes wide with a mix of disbelief and overwhelming hope. Her grandmother, Maria, had tears welling in her eyes, her hands pressed to her mouth, completely overcome. She had prayed for a blessing, a distant glimpse, but never in her wildest dreams had she imagined anything like this. The Pope finally reached the metal barrier, his long, flowing robes almost touching the cold, unyielding metal. He paused, his presence radiating an almost palpable warmth. He looked down at Alara, his eyes crinkling at the corners, a gentle smile gracing his lips. He was so close now that Alara could see the fine lines around his eyes, the slight tremble in his hand as he reached out, not to her directly, but to the small, crumpled drawing she held. The drawing, a simple dove with an olive branch, was now a bridge between worlds, a testament to pure, innocent faith. "My dear child," Pope Leo XIV said, his voice a soft, melodic rumble, surprisingly clear despite the low din of the crowd. His words were simple, yet carried a profound depth that seemed to reach directly into Alara's young heart. "Is this for me?" he asked, his gaze gentle, his eyes twinkling with genuine affection. He did not immediately reach to touch her, respecting her space, allowing her to initiate the connection. This deference, this quiet humility in such a powerful figure, was disarming. Alara, her voice a thin, reedy whisper, barely audible above the hushed anticipation, managed to nod, her eyes still wide with wonder. She slowly, deliberately extended the drawing. Her small fingers, usually so weak, found a surprising strength as she offered her precious gift. The plush lamb, forgotten, slipped from her lap and landed softly on the cobblestones. Pope Leo XIV carefully took the drawing, his large, calloused fingers delicately closing around the paper. He held it up, examining the simple lines and vibrant colors with an almost scholarly intensity, as if it were a masterpiece. "A dove," he mused aloud, his voice thoughtful, "and an olive branch, a symbol of peace, my dear, a beautiful, beautiful gift." He smiled, a genuine, heartwarming smile that seemed to erase the years from his face, revealing the compassionate priest he had always been. He then looked up, his gaze sweeping over the crowd, a silent acknowledgement of the thousands of witnesses. He did not seem perturbed by the security concerns, nor the frantic whispers of Rossi, who now stood frozen, unable to intervene in such a profoundly personal moment. He knelt. It was a slow, deliberate movement made difficult by his age and the stiffness of his robes. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath. Chief Inspector Rossi flinched, a small, involuntary movement of shock. A pope, kneeling before a child in a wheelchair in St. Peter's Square, surrounded by security, was an image utterly unprecedented, a profound shattering of protocol. The ancient stones of the square seemed to absorb the weight of that gesture, the humility inherent in it. When he was eye level with Alara, his face, etched with wisdom and kindness, was directly before hers. He reached out, his hand gentle, and rested it lightly on her fragile arm. It was a touch that carried no fanfare, no theatricality, just pure, unadulterated human connection. "Ilara," he said, her name sounding tender on his lips, as if he had known her for a lifetime. He had heard her grandmother whisper it earlier, a quiet plea to remain still. Ilara's eyes, fixed on his, suddenly welled with tears. Not tears of sadness, but of overwhelming emotion, of feeling truly seen, truly heard. Her small, thin shoulders trembled. "Your Holiness," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. I prayed you would see me." Pope Leo XIV squeezed her arm gently. "And I did, Ilara. Your light, your beautiful spirit shone brightly. It called to me." He paused, his gaze momentarily distant, a flicker of memory passing through his eyes. The moment became deeply introspective, as if the entire square had faded away, leaving only these two figures in a silent, profound communion. "Do you know, Ilara," he began, his voice soft, almost a murmur, "that once a very long time ago, when I was much younger, not a pope, just a simple priest, I met another child much like you." His eyes, usually so composed, now held a deep, reflective sadness, mingled with a quiet strength. Her name was Livia. He looked at Ilara, then back out at the crowd, though his gaze seemed to pass through them, seeing something else entirely. Livia lived in a small, dusty village in the foothills of the Andes. I was a missionary there, filled with youthful zeal, convinced I could change the world with grand sermons and ambitious projects. He paused, a wry, self-deprecating smile touching his lips. "I was a very different man then, Ilara, full of ideas but perhaps not enough understanding." Flashback, the dry, red dust of the Andean village clung to everything. Father Robert Prevost, then a robust man in his late 30s, wiped sweat from his brow, his simple cassock already stained. The sun was merciless, baking the earth, and the poverty was stark, unyielding. He had arrived 6 months prior, brimming with energy, eager to build schools, establish clinics, to bring hope to a place where it seemed to have withered. But the challenges were immense, the resources scarce, and his youthful optimism was slowly being eroded by the harsh realities. He felt a creeping despair, a sense of inadequacy that gnawed at his faith. One afternoon, during a house visit, he entered a small, dilapidated shack, its walls crumbling, its roof patched with scavenged tin sheets. Inside, in the dim, cool silence, lay Livia. She was 7 years old, slender and frail, her limbs twisted by a severe form of polio. She lay on a straw mat, a threadbare blanket pulled up to her chin, her eyes, dark and luminous, fixed on a faded image of the Virgin Mary tacked to the wall. Her mother, a stoic woman named Anna, worked tirelessly in the fields, leaving Livia in the care of her elderly grandmother, who was often too weak herself to do much more than sit beside her. Father Robert had seen many sick children, many suffering souls in his time in the village, but Livia was different. There was a quiet dignity about her, a profound stillness that belied her young age. She rarely cried, rarely complained. She simply existed day after day, confined to her mat, her world circumscribed by the 4 walls of the shack. He had offered prayers, brought what little food he could, but felt a crushing impotence in the face of her immutable condition. He wanted to fix it, to heal her, to provide the elaborate medical care she so desperately needed, but that was utterly unobtainable in that remote place. He felt his faith waver, questioning a God who allowed such innocent suffering. One day he found Livia humming softly, a simple, wordless melody. She had a small, crude doll made of corn husks clutched in her hand. Her face, usually so serene, held a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "What are you humming, Livia?" he had asked, sitting beside her mat, the dust settling on his shoes. She had looked at him, her dark eyes surprisingly bright. "A song, Padre, for the bird outside." She nodded towards a tiny, chipped window through which a sliver of blue sky was visible. He had never seen a bird near their shack. The village was too barren. "It sings for me every morning, Padre. It tells me stories of the mountains, of the river, of the world outside." Father Robert had felt a prickle of tears in his own eyes. Livia was blind. He had known this, of course, but had rarely addressed it directly. She couldn't see the mountains or the river, couldn't see the bird, yet she spoke of them with such vivid conviction. He had felt ashamed of his own despair. his focus on what he couldn't change, while this child, stripped of so much, found beauty and joy in an unseen world, in the simple music of her own heart. He saw then that his efforts had been too focused on material change, on what he could do for them, rather than on what he could be for them. From that day forward, his approach to his ministry shifted. He spent more time simply being with the people, listening, truly listening to their stories, their struggles, their quiet triumphs. He would visit Livia every day, not just to bring food or pray, but to sit and listen to her songs, to hear her descriptions of the world as she perceived it through sound and touch and imagination. She taught him about a different kind of sight, a deeper way of seeing. She showed him that faith wasn't about grand interventions or miraculous healings, but about finding grace and connection in the smallest, most vulnerable moments. She taught him that sometimes the most profound impact came not from what you built or provided, but from simply being present. One cold morning after a particularly harsh rainy season, Livia's breathing grew shallow. He sat by her side, holding her frail hand as her grandmother murmured prayers. Livia, though weak, still hummed her wordless song. She reached out, her fingers searching for his. "Padre," she whispered, her voice barely there. "The bird is singing me to sleep tonight. It's a beautiful song." And then, with a peaceful sigh, she was gone. Her death had been a profound sorrow, but also a profound turning point for Father Robert. Livia had shown him that faith wasn't about erasing suffering, but about finding meaning and compassion with an asterisk it. She had taught him that the true miracle was not in a physical healing, but in the enduring spirit, the capacity for joy and hope even in the most dire circumstances. He carried her memory with him, a quiet, guiding light throughout his priesthood, through his elevation to cardinal, and now, as Pope Leo XIV. End of flashback. Pope Leo XIV returned to the present, his eyes, glistening with unshed tears, refocusing on Alara. "Livia taught me, Alara," he said, his voice husky with emotion, "that true sight is not always with the eyes, and true strength is not always in the legs. It is in the heart, my dear, in the spirit that can find beauty even in darkness and hope even in stillness." He gently squeezed her hand again, his touch conveying a depth of empathy that transcended words. Alara, captivated by his story, nodded slowly, tears streaming down her own cheeks. She felt a profound understanding, a connection to this powerful man who had knelt before her, revealing such a vulnerable part of himself. Her grandmother, Maria, openly wept, tears coursing down her weathered face, not of sorrow but of overwhelming tenderness and gratitude. She understood now. This was not just a random act of kindness. It was a deeply personal, spiritual moment, a bridge built from a past lesson to a present blessing. The crowd, which had been silent, hanging on every soft word the Pope uttered, now began to stir, not with shouts or cheers but with a collective, profound sigh. Many had been filming, their cell phone cameras capturing every nuance of the Pope's interaction, his kneeling, his hushed words. Now they were lowering their phones, their gazes unfocused, their faces reflecting a range of emotions: surprise, confusion, then slowly, undeniably, deep empathy. A collective wave of tears, a soft, almost silent weeping began to spread through the square. Hardened journalists, their faces usually impassive, wiped away tears with the backs of their hands. Security guards, their expressions usually stern, now looked away, their eyes glistening. Chief Inspector Rossi, still standing frozen nearby, felt an unfamiliar ache in his chest. He had seen the Pope in countless public appearances, had meticulously planned security for myriad events. He had witnessed joy, reverence, adoration. But never, not once, had he witnessed such raw, unfiltered humanity, such a profound, collective vulnerability. He looked at the Pope, kneeling there, his back slightly bowed, his hand resting on the child's arm, and saw not the distant, infallible pontiff, but a man, deeply moved, deeply human, burdened by a past and illuminated by a present. A young woman in the crowd, a tourist from America, openly sobbed, her hand pressed to her mouth. "He's just a man," she choked out to her friend, her voice thick with emotion. "A real human being." Her friend, equally tearful, nodded, unable to speak. The rigid barriers of formality, of spiritual hierarchy, had dissolved in that moment, replaced by the universal language of empathy. Pope Leo XIV, still kneeling, looked up at Maria, Ilara's grandmother. "You have raised a beautiful spirit, Maria," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "A testament to enduring faith." Maria could only nod, her throat tight with emotion, her hand reaching out to touch his arm, a gesture of profound gratitude. He then looked back at Ilara, his smile returning. "Ilara, my dear," he said, his voice gentle, "will you continue to share your songs with the world? Will you continue to see the beauty that others might miss?" Ilara, her eyes shining through her tears, nodded vigorously. "Yes, Your Holiness," she whispered, her voice gaining a surprising strength. "I will." He paused, a profound silence enveloping them. Then slowly, deliberately, he rose. The movement was measured, respectful. He did not rush, allowing the moment to linger, to imprint itself on the collective consciousness. He still held Ilara's drawing in his hand, a tangible symbol of their connection. He looked once more at the child, offered a small, knowing smile, and then turned. He did not immediately walk away. Instead, he turned his gaze to the vast sea of faces that stretched before him. His blue eyes, still glistening, scanned the crowd, taking in the tear-streaked faces, the humbled expressions, the shared vulnerability. He raised his hand, not in a grand blessing, but in a simple, almost intimate gesture, as if acknowledging a profound truth that had just been collectively revealed. "My brothers and sisters," he began, his voice resonating with a quiet power that seemed to echo through the square, amplified not by loudspeakers, but by the raw emotion of the moment. "Often seek grand miracles, signs in the heavens, answers in the pronouncements of prophets. But sometimes," he paused, his gaze sweeping over them once more, "sometimes the greatest miracles are found in the smallest of hearts, in the quiet courage of a child, in the simple act of truly seeing another." He held up Ilara's drawing, the small dove and olive branch visible to all. This small, beautiful gift reminds us that peace begins not in treaties or declarations, but in the compassion we extend to one another. It reminds us that every soul, no matter how small, no matter how vulnerable, carries within it a light, a song, a truth that can illuminate our path if only we open our hearts enough to listen. He paused again, allowing his words to sink in, to resonate with the collective emotion of the crowd. The quiet weeping had subsided somewhat, replaced by a profound, reverent silence. "Let us remember today," Pope Leo XIV continued, his voice steady, "that the message of Easter, of resurrection, is not just about triumph over death, but about finding new life, new hope, new understanding in unexpected places. It is about recognizing the sacred in the mundane, the divine in the human." With a final, gentle nod, he lowered his hand. Chief Inspector Rossi, still reeling from the unexpected turn of events, subtly signaled to his team. The Swiss guards, their initial shock giving way to a renewed sense of purpose, resumed their precise formation around the Pope. The procession, which had been momentarily halted, now began to move again, slowly, deliberately, but with a palpable shift in its energy. It was no longer just a formal procession. It was a journey of renewed purpose. As Pope Leo XIV walked away, back along the designated path, the crowd parted for him, not with the usual jostling and eager outreach, but with a quiet reverence, their faces still wet with tears, their eyes filled with a new kind of understanding. Many whispered prayers, some simply watched, lost in the profundity of what they had just witnessed. The image of the kneeling Pope, the small child in the wheelchair, and the simple drawing of a dove became instantly etched in their minds, a powerful tableau that defied all expectations. The news of the Pope's embrace spread like wildfire across the globe. Within hours, videos of the moment, raw and unedited, flooded social media. News anchors, usually detached and objective, struggled to maintain their composure as they reported on the unprecedented event. Photographs of Pope Leo XIV kneeling before Ilara adorned the front pages of every newspaper, a powerful symbol of compassion cutting through the usual headlines of conflict and crisis. The Vatican press office, initially flustered by the spontaneous breach of protocol, quickly issued a statement highlighting the Pope's profound commitment to the marginalized and his deeply personal pastoral approach. They did not attempt to explain away the emotional intensity, but rather leaned into it, understanding its power. In the days and weeks that followed, the story continued to resonate. Alara, suddenly the focus of global attention, handled it with a quiet grace beyond her years. Journalists flocked to her humble home in Tuscany, eager to hear her perspective. She spoke simply, articulately, of the Pope's kindness, of the story he shared, and how she felt seen. Her grandmother, Maria, recounted the journey to Rome, her hopes, and the overwhelming moment of grace in St. Peter's Square. Their lives, though still marked by the challenges of Alara's condition, were suddenly filled with a newfound light, a sense of purpose that transcended their small village. Offers of support, of medical assistance, began to pour in from around the world, testament to the profound impact of one man's compassionate act. Back in the Vatican, life continued but subtly altered. Chief Inspector Rossi, initially chagrined by the security breach, found himself unexpectedly changed. He reviewed the footage of the event repeatedly, no longer looking for security flaws, but for the subtle nuances of the Pope's movements, the gentle kindness in his eyes. He realized that sometimes true security lay not in impenetrable barriers, but in the strength of human connection, in the very vulnerability that the Pope had embraced. He began to see his role not just as a protector of a person, but as a guardian of moments, of a sacred space where the human and the divine could unexpectedly intersect. His team, too, seemed to carry a renewed sense of their duties, their professionalism now infused with a deeper understanding of the Pope's mission. Pope Leo XIV, for his part, remained unchanged by the global adulation. He received the outpouring of praise and media attention with his characteristic humility, always deflecting it back to the message, to the need for greater empathy and compassion in the world. Yet internally, the encounter with Alara had reignited something profound within him. Livia's memory, which had always been a quiet presence, now burned brighter, a constant reminder of the raw, unadorned truth of faith found in the margins. He knew that the burden of his office was immense, the expectations heavy, but Alara had reminded him that the most powerful sermons were often unspoken, delivered not from a balcony, but from the level of the heart. A few months later, in a quiet, private audience away from the glare of the cameras, Alara and her grandmother were invited back to the Vatican. This time, there were no crowds, no security cordons, just the soft light filtering through stained glass windows and the hushed reverence of the apostolic palace. Pope Leo XIV, in simpler white robes, greeted them not as a distant dignitary, but as a beloved friend. He spent an hour with Alara, listening to her talk about her new friends at school, about the books she was reading, about her continuing love for painting. He showed her the drawing of the dove, which he had framed and hung in his private study, a constant reminder of that pivotal Easter morning. "Your drawing, Alara," he told her, his eyes warm, "is a constant source of inspiration to me. It reminds me that even in the highest office, the simplest truths are often the most profound." He spoke to her about Livia again, sharing more details of their quiet friendship in the dusty village, drawing parallels between their lives, the shared vulnerability and the shared capacity for an extraordinary spirit. He told her how Livia had taught him to truly see beyond what was visible, and now, Alara was continuing that lesson for him and for the world. Alara, feeling completely at ease in his presence, even giggled once when he made a small, self-deprecating joke about his clumsy attempts at drawing as a boy. This was a different kind of audience, a deeper connection forged in shared humanity. As they prepared to leave, the Pope placed his hand gently on Alara's head, offering a quiet, personal blessing. "May your spirit always shine, Alara," he murmured, "and may you continue to teach us all the true meaning of peace and joy." The story of Pope Leo XIV and Alara continued to be told, not just in headlines, but in whispers in crowded churches, in quiet conversations at dinner tables, in the hearts of millions. It became a modern parable, a testament to the idea that true leadership was not about power or distance, but about radical empathy, about the courage to break with convention for the sake of connection. Pope Leo XIV's papacy became defined by this moment, a symbol of his unwavering commitment to reach out to the most vulnerable, to remind the world that every soul held immeasurable worth, and that sometimes the greatest lessons came from the quietest voices. The tears shed that Easter morning in St. Peter's Square were not of sorrow, but of profound understanding, a collective awakening to the raw, beautiful power of genuine human compassion. And in the heart of Pope Leo XIV, the memories of Livia and Alara intertwined, two bright, guiding lights, forever illuminating his path. His papacy, once marked by quiet humility, was now a shining beacon of audacious love. It was a love that defied security protocols, ignored the grand stage, and knelt, humbly, before the smallest among us, reminding everyone that the truest miracles unfolded not with a roar, but with a whisper and a single, heartfelt touch.